It's out there in rural India as well. So alcoholism and drugs, sanitation, cleanliness, religious conflicts, communalism, unemployment, agricultural distress. I mean, the list is really quite endless. The kind of problems people across the country face, you and I may not. We are from a privileged background. But even in our privileged urban middle class worlds, there are any number of issues that really comprise this whole rainbow of social issues that we must, as journalists, report about. Why are we talking about it? Because somehow, in my experience as a journalist for the last 40 years, it has become unfashionable. Social reporting is not fashionable reporting. You know, in my time in NDTV, I used to have a lot of applications for interns, very bright young people who would come and join and train for about 3 months at my office. And I would ask them that, what is your area of interest? And you have to believe me, but maybe out of 10 people, 1 person would say politics, 2 persons would say sports, and the rest, 7 out of 10, would say entertainment. And not one single person said to me that, ma'am, I'm interning with you here at NDTV to become a journalist who wants to specialize on, say, the fate of the Dalits in this country, their conditions, or somebody who wants to do something about the dowry system, which is getting worse in the country by the day, despite all the education and literacy that we talk about, that India is becoming so literate, and yet dowry continues. Not one person, not one intern has said this to me. 7 out of 10, so that's a good 70%, would tell me, man, I want to become an entertainment reporter. I found it very frustrating, and I would tell some of them that you have come to the wrong place, sadly. You know, it's not even like that they want to report on, entertainment reporting. It's serious business. They wouldn't want to talk about gender disparity in the kind of money men and women film stars get. No, they would not want to talk about that. They would not want to talk about how culturally, traditional cultural practices, like, say, the jatras of Bengal, or people's theater out in some village somewhere, or other, traditional cultures, or even, music, classical music. Even these would fall by the wayside when it came to competing with the glamour of Bollywood equals entertainment. There was no interest in issues like that, and it is very alarming, simply because I think this kind of reporting about social issues has become, over the years, very unfashionable. And therefore, social reporting, and I'm so glad that we are discussing it today. Very few people have done as much as P. Sainath for social reporting. He is an independent journalist now, very senior. And if I may ask you again at this point of time for a show of hands, how many out of 56 people here have heard of P. Sainath? Oh, good. I can see Rikta is probably raising her hand. Anybody else? Okay. That's not a good number, guys. I really suggest that you read his, for me, very critically important book, which he wrote some time ago. It's called Everybody Loves a Good Draught. He wrote it, I think, around the time he got a Magsaysay Award for his journalism. That was in 2007. If you want to make a note of it, it's Everybody Loves a Good Draught, and it's by P. Sainath. It's in English, so please pick up a copy and read it. Now, he has certainly, really done a lot to raise the issue of social reporting. Not only did he get the Magsaysay Award in 2007 for it, he has written many, many others. He speaks widely and he does amazing work in rural reporting. His stories are something of an example for every serious journalism student. He also runs an organization called PARI, PARI, which is an acronym for People's Archive of Rural India. That's available on the internet. Just click on the link and read up on what they are doing, the kind of work they are doing, and I think you will find it inspiring and probably motivated. It'll probably motivate you to go ahead and look at social reporting more seriously than ever before. Now, Mr. Sainath, in an interview, he said that the urbanization of the reporting media, was ending up in marginalizing rural issues. And I think he had a point. I mean, he also had some figures to substantiate that point. Apparently, in the national newspapers, dailies, 67% of the news covered was about the national capital. So that's Delhi, Delhi, Delhi. So crime in Delhi, weather in Delhi, traffic in Delhi, or whatever it was. And certainly Delhi is the capital and merits that importance, but 67%. I mean, Kolkata, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Thiruvananthapuram, they probably get mentioned on these newspapers, these urban-focused newspapers, once in a while. But I promise you, Satara is never in the news. Definitely Sharupnagar in Bengal is never in the news, or Bonga, or up in Punjab, Wagah border might be fashionable to report about, but a little village somewhere in, say, Pathankot, where I once lived, never gets reported, unless, of course, there's a terror attack on the Air Force station at Pathankot, and then there is reporting. But otherwise, the urbanization of the media is definitely emerged as a huge problem. And not only why is it so urbanized? According to Sainath, that's because there is more and more focus on reporting in areas that will also ensure some kind of revenue stream for the media organization. And therefore, he says it is quite natural for the media house to focus on urban issues that will draw in the ads. Rural issues in some backwater somewhere is not going to draw in any ads. And therefore, this lopsided focus is very, very damaging. One of the examples he cited was agriculture. Now, I also can't remember. Newspapers have business reporters, they have sports reporters. Nowadays, they have gender reporters, they have education reporters, health reporters, the economy reporters, all kinds of reporters. But given the fact that that 70% of Indians today live in the villages and live off agriculture, farming, there are no agriculture reporters that I know of. I know there used to be labor reporters at one time in the newspapers. They used to specialize. There would be legal reporters who would also follow up on labor issues. Definitely in West Bengal, where back in the 1980s, very, very militant trade unionism was present. The C2, which is the labor wing of the CPM, was very active. And at that time, I remember there used to be reporters who used to specialize on labor issues. But I cannot for the life of me remember a reporter who was called an agriculture reporter or a farm reporter. And yet, 70% of India lives off farming. So by excluding reporting on farm issues, on agriculture, what we are doing is we are completely dismissing them. We are forgetting about 70% of the Indian population. And that is one of the dangers of the kind of journalism that is happening today. And therefore, the importance of social reporting. Perhaps a reporter who is doing this kind of reporting may not be an expert in seeds and fertilizers and water supplies and irrigation and all that. But, at least reporters should be exposed to the kind of issues that farmers are facing. Now, I can tell you that in my experience in the recent past, in the last year and a half, the farm laws, and believe me, I was confused about the issues. I confess I still am not 100% clear. I mean, MSP, I knew. What is MSP? How many of you know what is MSP, by the way? How many of you know what is MSP? Any hands coming up? Okay, so I have Tirtham Majumdar who says he knows what's MSP, Akash, Zaid and Polomi and Rikta. I'm very happy to see this, that today all of you know of what is MSP. But, I, as a journalist, found myself really in deep water when I was trying to deal with the farm law agitation that went on for more than a year in such a dramatic fashion. Journalists are just not fully aware of these issues simply because, agriculture. Who knows about all this? I still don't know what is the mandi system. I don't know what the differences are between systems in Punjab, systems in Bengal, systems in the South. And, we have 29 states and union territories as well. And every one of these places have different ways of doing the job. And I promise you, I don't know all this. I don't know it, I confess. And it's a disgrace that, we so ignore this huge landscape of people. Farmer suicides is hugely fashionable. I know everybody was reporting that. But again, we don't know so much about the whole agricultural system that we are doing grave injustice to about 70% of the people in this country. And so issues that must feature in our newspapers and television channels, and we should not be waiting for crisis like the farm laws to emerge for us to try and grapple with understanding these issues. There are, the few people who are reporting on agriculture, sadly, are doing so out of the agriculture ministry in Delhi. They, go to the ministry, talk to the minister, go to the secretaries, talk to them, maybe get some interesting details of what the budget allocation is going to be or whatever it is. And that's the kind of reporting that is happening. Largely, I'm sure there are some people who are doing much more. I'm sure, say in Punjab, where the farm issue is such a big issue, there were reporters who are doing it. But overall, I would say this is a huge lacuna that hit us in the face, journalists like us in the face in 19, 20, 21. It was a disgrace. Ground level reporting is becoming minimal. There is the urban versus rural bias, and ground level reporting is becoming minimal simply because of the costs involved. And like I said, at one time, today everybody is telling me no one is watching television news anymore. Everybody is, on their mobile phones. Whatever news they need, they get it on the phone. Newspapers are dead. That's what a lot of people are telling me. And I asked a very senior person in the industry, why do you say television is dying, television news? And their answer was that television's job was to take the viewer to the place where something is happening, to the people who have something to say. But now we don't have that. What do we have? And it's true, when you think about it, I will tell you that on many days when there is a farmers' agitation happening in Punjab, and I'm trying to talk about the farmer issue here in Kolkata, what do? I stand in front of a government building and talk about what the government is doing to tackle the problem. I don't go to the farm and stand and talk to farmers anymore. Why? Not because I don't want to, but because the cost of it. So the costs are, also affecting the way we are reporting on issues. The urban-rural divide, that is affecting the way we are, reporting issues. And, like I said already, even within the urban space of reporting, probably a city like Mumbai, which is like the financial capital, that gets so much more time. The political capital gets so much more time, New Delhi, than all the other cities in the country and certainly the villages. The good news is, however, all hope is not lost. Things are changing. Now, let me do a quiz at this point. How many of you have heard of a documentary film called Writing with Fire? I hope there'll be lots of hands raised. Writing with Fire. Lovely. Rikta. Anybody else? Okay. This is probably a tougher question. How many of you have heard of Khabar Lahariya? Oh, wonderful. Shreya Banerjie. Shisha Das, that's 2. Sakshi, 3. Tirtham, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7. Okay, let's say 10. But honestly, 10 out of 60 odd students attending this workshop, not having heard of Khabar Lahariya, is itself a story. You are all journalism students. You should have heard of Writing with Fire by now. You should have heard of Khabar Lahariya. Why are these names famous? Now, some 12 years ago, tired of being non-existent in the news media, of being sidelined, ignored, made to feel completely irrelevant to the discourse in the country, a group of women, and they were Dalit women, mind you, they got together and with the help of a grant from an NGO, they started a newspaper called Khabar Lahariya. So that's the name of the newspaper. This was somewhere in Bundelkhand in Uttar Pradesh. I forget the exact name of the village. They now have an office in Delhi, but that's where it all started, in Bundelkhand, and this was about a dozen years ago. So today, there are 40 women who are running this newspaper, and it's an all-women staff. All the reporters, they have been covering everything from Uttar Pradesh elections to what they say in their website, sex, dhoka, and dosti. Everything is covered in that newspaper, which, even more importantly, went digital just before the Uttar Pradesh elections this time. So all the women were given cell phones and they went out and they did stories and they were fantastic. A completely different perspective. And 2 young people in Delhi, a lady called Rinku Thomas and a gentleman called Shushmit Ghosh, they have created this amazing documentary on this huge effort by these 40 women, an all-women's team. That film is called Writing with Fire. And that film, why you should know that name, is because it has already won several international awards and it has been shortlisted for the Oscars. And I have seen trailers, which I'm just going to share with you. I have seen trailers, I have heard the young people speak about their filmmaking effort. New York Times and Washington Post, they are raving about that film. Christiane Amanpour of CNN, she has done a 16-minute segment with them on the film, on the newspaper, and it is fabulous. I mean, we in India should be so proud of this film for so many levels, not only because it has made it to the Oscars, shortlisted in the documentary segment, but because of the story it tells. I think one of the newspapers has described it as the most important story on journalism ever told. And, Debayan, if you have the trailer with you, if you could please share it with the students. Writing with Fire.
वाह, मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा। हमने अभी तक वो फोन चलाया भी नहीं है, डर लग रहा है कि कहीं बिगड़ ना जाए, कहीं कुछ ना हो जाए। ऐसा समय ही आ गया है कि उसके बगैर हम नहीं मतलब पीछे रह जाएंगे। मुझसे तो पूछते हैं तो मैं भी पूछ लेती हूँ कि आप कौन से कास्ट के हैं। अब वो कहते हैं मैं ब्राह्मण हूँ तो मैं भी कह देती हूँ मैं भी ब्राह्मण हूँ। जो खबर लिखनी होती है उसमें पैसा नहीं लगता है, इसलिए हमसे उतनी ही बात करिए जितना समझ में आए, उससे ओवर नहीं। हमारे प्रदेश में दलित औरतों का पत्रकार के रूप में कोई सोच भी नहीं सकता। 14 साल में हमने इस मानसिकता को काफी हद तक बदला है। इन दमंग लोगों ने क्या किया, उसको पत्थर मारकर हत्या कर दी और किसी पर भरोसा नहीं। एक लहरिया ही ऐसे न्याय दिला सकती हो। एक हैरानी वाली बात है कि थाने को पता नहीं, पुलिस स्टेशन को पता नहीं है, क्योंकि मैं उस जगह से हूँ। मारू है, मेरे लिए तो बहुत ही रिस्की है। कभी 11 बजे कभी 12 बजे कोई टाइमिंग है नहीं है। इस जगह पे मैं हूँ, उस जगह पे अगर आप होते तो क्या करते? पहले अपना काम बाद में करो। मुझे तो नहीं लगता है। जो आपके साथ संगठन है वो देश के भविष्य में किस तरह भागीदारी में है? संघ शक्ति कलयुग है, संगठन है, संगठन में शक्ति है। डर लग रहा दीदी अभी तो। खबरें कहाँ गई? कोई खबर दिख ही नहीं रही है। जो हमारी कवरेज होगी वो अन्य मीडिया से बहुत अलग होगी। हर कोई को जानना चाहिए कि हाँ हम पत्रकार थे, एक महिला पत्रकार, और किस तरह की पत्रकारिता हमने की है।
Okay, so
मेरा दिल हौसला देता है मेरे लिए।
So there you are. Look out for it. Look out for the Oscars. And I am certainly personally hoping that Writing with Fire gets it, because it'll be, a salute to the huge effort that has gone into it. But I have to tell you, at the end of the day, such is the state of the media that, I have seen many interviews with the two young directors who have made the film. This is on Indian news channels. I've seen many articles on the making of the film and so on. But just the other day, as I was flipping through Twitter, I also saw a comment by somebody which made me stop and think. He wrote that exactly what I said right now. I have seen interviews with the filmmakers, but I haven't seen interviews with the journalists of Khabar Lahariya. I mean, that is the irony, really, that this young filmmakers, they go and make a film about this, absolutely milestone of an effort to, defeat so many odds that people face in real life. Dalit, women, putting out a newspaper, being threatened, there are attempts to bribe them. They overcome all of that, and their story turns into an Oscar-nominated film. But we see the directors, who are a young, urban pair of people. We are hearing them all the time, but not enough of, enough personal stories of these women who have made such a difference to their own lives. The editor of this newspaper is a lady called Kavita Singh, and really, as journalists, we must celebrate what she has achieved. Moving on, for the hard stuff, how on earth do you do an earth-shattering Pulitzer Prize-winning report on a social issue? The nitty-gritties of that are pretty tough, let me tell you. I haven't won a Pulitzer for reporting on a social issue. So don't take me as the last word on this. But here are some, thoughts I have on the issue. I have read you already a list of issues that exist. Choose an issue that appeals most strongly to you, an issue that you feel strongly about, something perhaps with which you have a personal connect, or perhaps not. Perhaps the issue with, about disabilities, people with disabilities, how difficult, the difficulties they face, and how much time do we give to the kind of issues they face. Should be writing much more about them than we do. Maybe you have a cousin who has a physical challenge, or an aunt, who has another, maybe she can't hear, or somebody who can't see. So if there is somebody, with a personal connect who makes you think about the issue, try and pick something as simple as that. Domestic violence, for instance. I, for a fact, know that this is one issue that really bothers me. I haven't done much about it, but every domestic help that has worked in my house in the last 20 years is an abandoned woman. Abandoned by her husband, left to fend for herself and the children. It's a very sorry story, this, and perhaps if I were in your place, I would choose domestic violence against women in Bengal and elsewhere in the country. It could be caste. Just read the matrimonial sections on Sunday newspapers, and you will realize that it's a huge problem, even here in Bengal, where we like to say that there is no caste system, but it is very much there. Perhaps a little less than other states in degrees, but the problem is enormous, even in Bengal, where, and not enough is said about it in our media at all. All those matrimonial ads which say, this gotro, that gotro, Brahmins only, Namo Shudro, and what else. So you could pick a subject like that. You could be interested in education, or the lack of facilities for education, healthcare, which has been the huge thing in the last 2 years with COVID. And what kind of healthcare infrastructure exists in this state, in this country? And despite the COVID pandemic, what have we learned from it? Has anything changed? In fact, I believe that in this budget, the health budget has actually been cut by a couple of %, which is utterly shocking, but it has barely got mentioned in the newspapers. I know doctor friends have pointed it out to me and said, why are we not talking about this? We've just come through a disaster, the pandemic, and yet the health budget has been synced and nobody is talking about it. So you could pick up something like that. How to do it? Research the subject. There is really no excuse. You have Google, you have all kinds of data out there. There are books, there is the internet, there are sources, there are experts. Find the data. There is just no excuse to be sloppy and not back your story with data, which is why if Uma Shankar Pandey is still here, I want a YouTube recording of your presentation, I think it was yesterday or day before, on data journalism. That is really not exactly my kind of journalism. It's, just numbers don't make sense to me. But, data is so important if you want to give your story that solidity that will make a real difference. So find the data, no excuse not to. Be specific when you address an issue. Don't say things like, many women in Bengal have got Lokshmi Bhandar grants. Find a number. If you ask me just now, I can't tell you, but it's lakhs and lakhs. But don't say lakhs and lakhs for goodness sake. Go out there, just go on the net and you will find it. And government is much more open today. Much more data is out there. So you can find it. And then there is always RTI. You must have data, be specific, and humanize the story. I was just telling you that, data journalism is kind of new, and I find it a little alien. I mean, can numbers really tell stories? But apparently they can. However, it would help enormously to humanize your stories. For instance, when I went to these Lokhir Bhandar camps, when the money was being distributed, I saw stampedes for the money. Women like rushing to to reach the counter first. I mean, there were physical tussles. There were incidents up in North Bengal. I remember I saw the pictures where women fell to the ground, were crushed under people stampeding to reach or break through the gates first. It was insane, but humanize the story, just find out what kind of difference is it making to their lives. Find out a woman who got crushed in a stampede at the Lokhir Bhandar venue. Talk to her and ask her what made her go and stand in line and risk her life to get that 500 rupees. Also personalize it. Just as I'm telling you right now that I went to a Lokhir Bhandar money distribution center and I saw this, just like I'm telling you this, write about it, show the pictures, because that's the way to sort of make the problem, sort of take the issue to the people who are your readers or your viewers. So, and listen to their stories. Like, for instance, initially when this whole Lokhir Bhandar thing was announced by the government, I thought 500 rupees? What difference can that make to anybody's life, for goodness sakes? One little McDonald's burger is about that much. And then I heard the stories from the women themselves about how somebody said her husband is physically challenged and can't work, and that 500 rupee was a lifesaver. Then I heard about how her child had had an accident, another woman, she said. And she said she couldn't afford the medicines that the child required. So with that 500 rupees, maybe she could afford some of the medicines, not all, but some. Another woman told me that she didn't get enough to eat at home, that her in-laws were not the best, and she just didn't get enough to eat. And so she was going to take the 500 rupees and keep it with herself so that on occasion, when she wanted to and needed to desperately, she could go and get a bag of muri and chanachur or something like that, just to survive. I mean, for me, these stories were completely unreal. They were outside my experience, my perceptions, my understandings. So, admit it in your story that these are alien to you, because like many of your readers and viewers, this is alien to them too. And this is the point that you need to make, that you don't know it, but the domestic help working in your house may be that woman who needs to hide away the 500 rupees she got from Lokhir Bhandar so that she can have some muri once in a while. So these are, humanizing the story, personalizing it, backing it with data. All of us reporters, and I suspect all of you who are here attending this workshop today, we are alien mostly to what we are reporting about. We are not Khabar Lahariya reporters, Dalit women going out into, places that they are not expected to. We are very upper middle class people who can't even imagine that, 500 rupees can be worth anything in this day and age. So, be sensitive, get real, as you young people say often, get real, get sensitive, and get very, very humble. This, what you are seeing, what I have just told you about, is the life, and this is real and it's happening to someone. You want to report on it. Please just don't look down on them. Don't have that, white skin savior kind of attitude when you go to report on a situation like this. Be like them. That's the only way to do the story. Try and put yourselves into their shoes. But wait, be skeptical. Ask questions. That's your job as a journalist. Maybe that woman who took a 500 rupee from Lokhir Bhandar is secretly giving it to her son, who is a drug addict. He doesn't get the money, he doesn't get his dose of drug, he gets violent, so she gives him the money. That could be happening. She may be taking the money, but her husband, who is an alcoholic, may be grabbing it to go get his daily fix of, bangla. So look out for those elements as well. Just don't get overwhelmed by the emotional part of the story. Be clear-headed, be humble, be sensitive, be real, but also look out, be skeptical, question things. Maybe if there are many cases where that 500 rupee the woman is getting is becoming a problem in a village, in a family, then maybe it's worth reporting, because perhaps the policymakers could tweak policy a little bit and make it better. Let me share the story of Kanyasri. I'll just make it quick. Kanyasri, as you've heard about this, I'm sure. I'm not even going to ask for a raise of hands on this one. Kanyasri, a hugely successful program by the state government in West Bengal, which is aimed at ensuring that girls continue their education. So girls in class 10, in class 12 get a certain amount of money. And then if they're getting married, they get a certain amount of money. If they don't marry and continue their higher education, they get a certain amount of money, they get a cycle and all that stuff. So I had gone to a village in Shingur some time ago. And this was, of course, after the Shingur event, I think, the whole Tata Motors issue. And I had gone to a village and I got talking to a farmer. I was probably doing a story on the farm issue at that time, which is why I was sitting in the middle of a field and talking to this farmer, who I was so impressed. He said he had got a BA degree in 1973 from Srirampur, he said, and he spoke perfect English. So he was very happy to speak to me. I was happy to speak to him. I sat down next to the irrigation canal, and as he worked, I was talking to him. And he talked of this and that, and then suddenly he looked up, and I noticed that what he was seeing and I was seeing was two girls in school uniforms, young adults, on their cycles, standing by the side of a kacha road, and two young men, also perhaps class 12 students, also in uniform and in cycles, standing and chatting with them. And this young, old farmer, he suddenly burst out. And he said, "Ei dekhun, Kanyasri kore ei hocche." The girls are, getting money in their accounts. They think they are now the, very powerful members of the family. They are not getting married. They're just hanging around with young men. And they're not listening to their fathers. They are not listening to their mothers. The whole social fabric, this angry old farmer told me, the whole social fabric is getting destroyed. Of course, I didn't agree one bit with him. I think this program is great. It empowers young girls and certainly gives education a huge boost. But see, I found another side to the story, which was so interesting. Maybe in some ways it was disturbing the social fabric as it existed all these days. The disturbance could, end up in something better. It could create problems. And I would love to do this story, and find out if it's really statistically borne out. What I should do is go out there and find data on, is the age of marriage in women, is that going up because of Kanyasri perhaps? That would be a very interesting thing to find out. Or is the money being misutilized? There are reports of girls dropping out. There are reports of girls using the money to buy a fancy cell phone. So, examine the story. But the moral of the story is get multiple sides of a story, however emotional you might feel about it, get data, and you can't go wrong. Finally, issues like rape, child molestation, domestic violence, caste violence, communal violence, protect the victim. That's the only one thumb rule that you must follow. Do not reveal identities that would threaten them. There are laws, of course, about it. There is all kinds of laws about protecting identities, and you have to be aware of them. I have got into trouble a couple of times because of violation. One instance was when a child was molested in a school, And you're not supposed to show anything about the child, anything that gives away the child's identities. And I made a mistake of standing in front of the school to do a live and OB. And in the frame behind me, you could see the name of the school. Even the cameraman should have been alert to it. I should have been alert to it, but we let out the name of the child's school. And, I was pulled up for it quite severely. And I felt really, really bad. And of course, there was the challenge of Suzette Jordan. I can now freely take her name. Sadly, she is no more, but she came out, as it were, after her whole, after the whole, issue of her rape and became, virtually national news. She, for many, many days, her identity was not made public. And that was the rule, that was the law, so none of us did it. But one day, Suzette Jordan decided to march, go on a protest march with other women to protest another rape somewhere in the state. And so she was part of the march, and I was shooting it. And suddenly I run into Suzette Jordan, and my camera is on her. And I say, what do I do? I mean, I can't have a protest march and I can't not show Suzette. That's the story. So again, what did I do? I called up my office in Delhi and I said, what do I do now? I have to report this, that Suzette Jordan has now turned activist. How do I do it without revealing her identity? So they said, the only thing you can do so that we don't get into legal trouble is get her to say on tape that she is willingly participating in this interview and coverage. And that's what I did. I said, Suzette, your identity. And she said, I'm fine with it, revealing my identity. I'm Suzette Jordan, so-called street rape survivor. So that's how we took her story. Now, these are issues one has to be very careful about, very sensitive about. Otherwise, not only would you be violating journalistic ethics, you could also run foul of the law. I think I've overrun my time. I've shared my experiences over the last 50 minutes almost. And I'm hoping and praying that you will keep a few minutes of what I have said and shared with you when you go into intern at newspapers and news portals and television stations. And when you are asked, what is your area of interest? Please don't say politics or sports or entertainment. Please say social reporting. I will be ever so grateful for that. And I will have thought that my time with you has been well spent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monideepa, for such a wonderful perspective, and it can only come from someone who's lived a life of quality journalism, if I can use that word. I mean, and I'm sure all of these students were listening to you with rapt attention as you put it out in such wonderful terms, and we're absolutely delighted to have you on our side, as it were, of this development journalism mission, if I can use the term. And one person who would be delighted to see you on our side is the person who made this series possible, not here only in Kolkata, but before that in Rajasthan and in Assam as well. I'm talking of the communication specialist Unicef office for West Bengal, Ms. Sucharita Bardhan, and there are many other people who are part of this mission. Professor Dr. Jaya Chakraborty is one. She is the head Department of Mass Communication at Tezpur University. Then there is Professor Bhanawat at Rajasthan University. So can we have Ms. Sucharita Bardhan for a few minutes, please? Hi.
Thank you,
so much.
Dr. Pandey. I think I wanted to come in because I wanted to say a big thank you to Monideepa. And one of the reasons that we wanted to have practicing journalists speak to the student is exactly on the lines as she said, that when she had interns, none of them really expressed interest in looking at social or covering social news. So we realized that in the way that the curriculum is planned or the pedagogy of it is planned, we don't really have options of our students interacting so much with journalists. And perhaps these interactions and these exchanges of your experience, immense experience, is also striking a chord somewhere. And that is the role that we'd like to play. There are a number of very interesting insights that Monideepa has provided, and I am requesting students to reflect on it because these are extremely important. Like I said yesterday, perhaps much later, you would have realized the importance of a session like this, because it doesn't come every day. And you are extremely lucky to hear directly from Monideepa, who we've all seen covering in her erstwhile position, covering news of all kinds. And she has brought some very interesting insights before you, instances before you about certain social issues that she covered, some of her experiences of looking at the other side of the story, and how within a program that she reports, there are other sides of the story which can be developed by using, both data as well as storytelling. So like USP has been specializing in data journalism, something that we also picked up together at some point of time, and he's a master of these. So he kind of got jet set and he rode himself onwards from there. Why we talk about it is because exactly on the lines that Monideepa mentioned, there is a lot of information in the public domain. And to be able to have the government or an important stakeholder listen to you, it's important to use their data and do your analysis, but not just by itself, as Monideepa said, that just data doesn't say anything, it's just numbers. How do you tell the story of people? And that is when she said personalization. And that is what we try and do even in our journalists training, in sessions like this, because that is what is important. And I'm really hoping that many of you would have looked at journalism while, of course, crime and political beat. And as Monideepa said, I was a little surprised that people want to do entertainment more, or even sports maybe. But I tell you that covering social issues, though it may seem to you is not glamorous enough, actually, if you're able to tell the story well, you'll have national news pick up the story. And I can tell you from experience, it's all about storytelling. It's about looking at the contemporary issues around you. It's about understanding data and using it appropriately. And again, as she said, that many people tell her that television is no longer in. And I had one of her colleagues in one of our Unicef network meeting talk about how they're moving from looking at, being part of television to going online. And one of the most important things that he had said is, we are looking at content creators, because that everybody is a producer now, but it depends on how well you produce your content for people to hear you. So the canvas is large, and we are really looking at you, young people. And we know and we hope that many of you will be prospective journalists, though I know that some may specialize in other areas too. But we pin our hopes on you. This is what we can do. We keep pinning our hopes because we feel that mainstream media deserves to hear about 70% of the population and the occupation or the background of these people who we don't always get to hear. So we will keep talking about it. We will keep advocating for it, just like I keep advocating that children's voices also need to be heard directly by them, not from your interpretation alone, but exactly what children have to say about themselves. So I just wanted to add a little more spice maybe, because I was feeling so excited when I was hearing her. And I know that she had met one of my colleagues on a flight from Jaipur. And I had heard about her a long time back. That was Shilagna, Monideepa. Long time back, you were on a flight with her. So she was telling me about you. So I was thinking that when we get here, maybe one of these days, I was telling Sneha also that we could, get people like Monideepa. you know, it's not because she's in front that I'm mentioning this. We need firebrand people. We need people who tell stories and is heard loudly. So we are looking at all of you to become one like her, or, you know, someone that can go closer to her. And another very important thing that she touched upon, and I need to mention, is while we go on to this domain, please remember that there are legal provisions, which you already mentioned. And one has to be very careful in order to work within that legal provision. There are some sessions on it also, and I'm hopeful that if you can go and look at POCSO Act and JJ Act, you will be able to figure it out yourselves. But very good to hear you, Monideepa. I'm very happy. I was listening almost right from the beginning, and very happy to see a number of you still there. And we will be waiting for our next session, which is also very interesting. And another of my very close friend and former colleague will be taking that session on media, women and children. Over to you, USP, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sucharita. I mean, this is why I invited you, because I know, I mean, you would be taking those important notes and you would be just summarizing it in a way in which only you can. And that again is such an important lesson for students, you know, someone at your position, you know, who's listening with rapt attention and taking those notes and, you know, acting upon that. And that is so very important. And it's really a delight, it's really a delight to, you know, listening to them. And with Monideepa, you know, awazi kafi, as we say, just the way she speaks is so very original. I mean, we keep on, we would love to keep on. And I have spoken to her about an offline session as well. So in April, whenever she's available, we'll organize an offline session at our college, and we'll invite whoever wants to join us. So, do students have any question apart from the mandatory thank you? Because I have a lot of thank yous on the chat box, and that is obviously very obvious. So do you have any question that you always wanted to ask Monideepa ma'am and you want to ask? She's there for another 3 minutes. Anyone? And you have তোমরা বাংলাতেও জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারো.
Absolutely. And if nobody is, you know, comfortable with asking a question or hasn't formulated one as well, again, I would request that you share my email. Please feel free to write in with questions, comments, disagreements, agreements with all that I have said. Always looking for feedback. That's something that only makes you better at what you're doing. Thank you very much.